and I'll be the host for today. Welcome to the day 2 of SAMAGRA 2025. After an inspiring start yesterday, today promises to be just as engaging and insightful. With a focus on deeper discussions and actionable takeaways, we will explore new perspectives, tackle challenges, and build on the connections made so far. Today's agenda is packed with thought-provoking sessions, hands-on workshops, and opportunities to collaborate with peers. Let's continue this journey of learning, collaboration, innovation, and grow together. We hope you are ready for another impactful day. It's my privilege to introduce Dr. Geetha Shantha for the first session, who will share her insights on individuals with learning differences. Dr. Geetha Shantha is an expert in education and dyslexia support, serving as the director of the English Language and Literacy Division at the Dyslexia Association of Singapore, that is DAS. She joined DAS in 2004 and has been spearheading the development and enhancement of numerous programs, including the main literacy program and innovative interventions like iReach and iStudy Smart, aimed at supporting students with specific learning needs. She also oversees special LD assessment services and staff professional development while actively contributing to research and conferences globally. Holding a doctorate in education and other advanced qualifications, her work focuses on empowering learners with dyslexia. Her recent research explores twice exceptionality, the coexistence of giftedness and learning disabilities, which acknowledges the strengths and immense potential of learners with learning differences. With almost 2 decades of experience supporting individuals with dyslexia, Geetha is dedicated to providing high-quality services that redefine their potential and encourage them to appreciate their unique abilities. Dr. Geetha also serves as the head of the DAS Research Committee and the registrar of the Register of Education Therapists, that is RETA in Asia, and an accomplished author in the field. And she also holds few publications on her name. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Geetha Shantha.
Right, I hardly deserve that. We've got some very wonderful people here. Now, this is going to slide, so got my timer set. Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing?
Good morning.
Feeling good?
Yes.
Had a great session yesterday?
Yes.
What a conference. Congratulations to the Anjali Foundation for putting this together. And deepest appreciation for inviting me here. I got to know so many beautiful people. I mean, all of you look beautiful to me. And at the same time, I've got to meet some very, very wonderful people doing good work in this area. And I just feel I need to say this. Sometimes we often look towards the West for information, right? We see them as maybe the center, the core of all of this. But the work that I've seen being done at the Anjali Morris Foundation, I think is on par with anything that I've seen elsewhere. So again, congratulations to the Anjali Morris Foundation. All right, so you know what I would like you all to do? I'd like you all to relax. Okay, we are going to be talking about some things that are serious, but we don't have to do it in a serious way. And to be very honest, I'm not a very serious person myself, right? I think it comes with having worked with children, right? We can't really take ourselves so seriously. So feel free to laugh, feel free to go, huh? What are you talking about? Do whatever you want to, but just let's have an open conversation about some of the things we're going to be talking about today, all right? So my topic is I Learn Differently. And in fact, how many of you as teachers do reviews to reinforce content that you have taught before? Thank you for participating. I see hands up. Wonderful, because I'm going to be asking you to do that a few times, okay? All right, so you're going to realize, if you attended yesterday's session, I think most of you did, right? You're going to realize that a lot of the things I've got to say, I may be saying it slightly differently, but were actually mentioned at yesterday's conference, right? And let's look at this as a review, a reinforcement of some of the messages that were shared yesterday. And today we're just refreshing our minds on these ideas. You must have spent the night reflecting on some of the things you've learned, and let's try and pull some of this together. Okay, so that's the topic, I learn differently. Of course you know, my name is Geetha, and I'm from the Dyslexia Association of Singapore. How many of you have been to Singapore? Wonderful. I'll ask you later what you think about it. Right? And so, you know, if I were to share with you Singapore, often what I would tell people is what you'd see in the map. Singapore is a little red dot. I forgot to turn on my timer because I don't want you to miss your tea. Okay. All right, so often what I'll tell people is it's a little red dot. In a map, sometimes the dot's bigger than the island itself, right? We've only got about 6 million people in the country, and if you travel by car, from one end to the other end, 45 minutes maximum. Right, on a good day, we hardly get traffic jams, as long as it's not during like the rush hour. You get from one end to the other end in 45 minutes. And so I asked myself, India, with its immense population, right, what am I going to bring to you? Because we need to find something in common, right? And of course, other than the fact that I'm Indian and my great-great-parents were probably from here, what else can I share? What else can I bring? And I found something. Like India, Singapore is a multilingual country. So the first pie chart you see there is the ethnic composition, right? So you can see the 74%, that's our largest demographic, made up of Chinese. And then about 9% Indians. You've got that 3% others, no one really knows who they are. So when you don't belong to any of the other three categories, you just get slotted as others. Sorry. Right? But what we also notice, and this statistics is from 2022, and I'm looking forward to an updated one. But you see that although the language of instruction in Singapore is English, and we're all expected to speak English, only 33% of the population actually speaks English at home. It's the language that they use most often. And then you see a variety of other languages coming in. So, like India, from what I read, McBride 2019, I don't know if that needs to be updated, but she said that India has 122 official languages and over 1,500 additional languages. What? So what I can tell you is, although the situation may not be the magnitude of the challenges may not be as significant as it would be in India, we in Singapore also do deal with the issue of having to teach children whose preferred language may not be the language of instruction, right? And what then happens is it's a demand on teacher versatility. The teacher has to be versatile enough to enable that sort of code switching between one language, which is the language they understand best, and the language that they need to learn in and do good at, right? And so I can only imagine how challenging it must be in India. So I'm not saying it's the same, but I'm saying that's something we have in common. Okay? And you're gonna listen to me talk for 90 minutes, a long time. And I think that you should get to know me a little better. The bio was very, very well put together, but I think that there's a lot more for me to learn. But maybe I'll share with you a little bit about my backstory, and then we can become friends, all right? So I did my bachelor's in English studies. So literature student here, love reading fiction. Favorite poets are William Butler Yeats and Rabindranath Tagore. And I then, right after I did my bachelor's and my honors, I went on to do my master's, also in English studies, right? And then I had the option of doing either a doctorate or going to work. And I said, you know what, Geetha, you've been a student for too long. You need some life experiences, right? So go to work. And I sat down and I thought to myself, okay, what am I going to do? With an English literature qualification, what am I going to do? And while I was schooling, we all do part-time jobs, right? Just to, you know, earn a little bit of extra income, some allowance. And I would always teach. And I would volunteer to teach students who were underprivileged. And I told myself, yeah, I do enjoy that experience. That's something I want to do. I did other things as well, like telemarketing and what else did I do? I was even a waitress at a restaurant. I tried those other things. F&B business, not for me. And calling people and trying to encourage them to make sales, not for me also. But I felt this fulfillment when I saw children's eyes light up. And go like, they got me. They understood me, right? So I went to my dad, my first mentor, right? And I said, I decided I'm going to become a teacher. In my mind, some of you may know this, I saw myself as Robin Williams in Dead Poets Society, right? Captain, like I was going to go and I was going to tell people how important literature is. You're going to learn the magic of words, right? So I went to my dad and I said, I'm going to be a teacher. So my dad said, okay. And he said, what kind of teacher do you want to be? So I said, no, I'm going to go teach literature. I mean, that's what I learned. And my father said these words to me. I journal, so I have them written down. So he told me, Geetha, do you want to be a run-of-the-mill, old schooler, British English? We've got that in common as well. He said, Geetha, do you want to be a run-of-the-mill sort of teacher, or do you want to teach children whom society thinks are unteachable? Okay? And I have to thank him for that, because that's when my journey in special education really started. So slightly over 2 decades ago, sounds so long ago, right? I feel so old every time I say that. I joined the Dyslexia Association of Singapore, where they trained us using the Autumn-Gillingham approach to teach children primarily with dyslexia. And I would teach about 40 students a week, right? And so you do encounter multiple profiles. And although you are trained to teach, and you've got a manual in front of you, you realize that with some children it's simpler. They have the diagnosis of dyslexia. Some children it's simpler. But with some children, they were an enigma. No matter what you tried, it didn't seem to work. It didn't seem to click. And of course, now we know there are things like comorbid issues. But as a new teacher, I found myself really puzzling over how I would help these students. I couldn't connect, right? I couldn't get them to see what I was trying to do. And that started my journey in trying to understand the different diverse profiles of learners we will see, even with the identity of being dyslexic, right? Of course, now the buzzwords are science of reading and science of learning. That's based on 5 decades of research. But if you ask me, the Autumn-Gillingham approach, which we have been using, does cover the basic premise of teaching children who have learning differences. So from then on, I moved on to become a trainer. And I would work with parents, I would work with teachers, I would work with special educational needs officers. That's what we call them in Singapore. And I'd often be asked this question, like, my child has these issues, but nothing is working. And we would sit down and we would mull over the profile and we'd think of what other contributing factors are causing these difficulties in our learners. Right? And then from there, I became a parent. Now, when you're a teacher, at least they give you training and they give you a manual. They give you a card deck and they say, here, give it a go, right? Nobody gave me any training to be a parent. No, nobody said, okay, this is what you got to do, and this is how you're going to do it, right? So going in the dark, only experience you have is how you were parented, right? And my 2 kids are as different as day and night, right? Very different. And then I asked myself, what should I be looking at? Now I'm gonna use a Tamil proverb here. That's the language we speak in Singapore, primarily as Indians. And some of you might know this. I know Dr. Desai will, and I don't know, Rita, that's right, Rita will know. Kakaiku tan kunji pon kunji, which means, literal translation, to a crow, its chick is a golden chick. Right? We know the raven's black, the crow's black, right? But to the crow, it's a golden chick. So as parents, we do see our children as almost these perfect beings. But then they sometimes disrupt that, right? That view that you have about them. And you go like, what's happening here? Right? And then, like I said, my kids were so different. And I was like, who am I paying more attention to? Am I paying attention to the one who is having some challenges? Am I paying attention to the one who is actually excelling? What should I do? And that influenced also my views when it came to instructions for learners with dyslexia. And of course, that lifelong journey of being a researcher. One of the things you have to do as a researcher is you have to leave your baggage behind, right? Whatever preconceived notions and biases, we all have them, right? You have got to leave that behind. You've got to listen completely to your participants, your respondents, right? And that forces you to sometimes confront some of the views that you might have, that you might hold. And that's what I really, truly enjoy. So you'll see that I'm always asking questions. Whenever I meet a group of teachers I've never met before, I'm always asking questions because I want to understand what their view is on this. And should that change my own personal views on some of the issues that we're going to be talking about today. And so all of these things have contributed to who I am today. And yesterday's conference also has impacted me. The conversations I've had with Ms. Swapna and her team have impacted me. And all of this is going to change. So I'm going to be a different person than I was yesterday and the day before, etc. So that's me in a nutshell. Well, not so much of a nutshell, it took a bit of time. Now, do you remember during the COVID period, filmmakers were doing this? They couldn't bring everyone together to shoot their long 2-hour movies, right? So what they did is they did these short story anthologies, right? And what that means is there will be a central running theme, but each one will have its own cast, its own story, its own ending, and then it will move on to another story. But the central theme is relevant throughout. Likewise, today I'm going to share with you 4 what I call big ideas. All right? There is a central theme. I learn differently is your clue. The central theme runs through all these 4 big ideas, but each idea is a story of its own. Okay, so let's go on to the first big idea. This here is 8-year-old Tara. That's obviously not 8-year-old Tara, but I'll tell you more about Tara in a while. 8-year-old Tara is now 13-year-old Tara. And this is an authentic profile, a profile that I know personally and I know very, very well. Okay, so you have to believe me on this when I tell you about 8-year-old Tara. So at 8 years old, Tara would read very, very slowly. If there were a few sentences in the page, she could cope. She would still read slowly, but she could cope. But the minute the page was filled with sentences, you would begin to see she would feel overwhelmed. She would miss her place in the passage, or she would forget what she had read, because she's reading so slowly, right? And she'll forget what she had read previously, and she'll have to go back. That means reading takes a long time. So while her friends are done, and they're already going on to answering questions, Tara is still trying to process this information as she's reading through. At 8 years old, she would typically get about 10 words weekly spelling test, right? And if it's the same here, the spelling words are not phonetically regular, they're irregular words. So she will use all the tricks that she has in her toolkit. She will use phonics, which she had been taught. She will use the look, cover, spell check approach that she'd been taught. She will be writing and rewriting that word, and then she would have a whiteboard, okay? Small one. And she would write, and then we would check, and then we would say wrong, give her some clues on how she could get this right, and then she would try again. Extremely hardworking. Spent hours on learning 10 spelling words, but at best, she would master maybe 3, right? And then she would get maybe 1 correct or 2 correct, and the teachers would say, try harder. We use that term so flippantly, don't we? Okay, maybe you guys don't. You're the enlightened ones. But teachers tend to use that term so flippantly, not knowing how many hours she had spent trying to learn just those 3 words. And it's always try harder. And we don't really ask ourselves when we say something like that, do we know how hard this person has already tried? She does reverse letters. Now we of course know that when they're very young, this is not really an issue. But if you've received intervention for reversals, and, using strategies like the BD reversals, etc., you've got the rabbit kung fu, as we call it, and any kind of strategies that you've already shared, but there is a persistent difficulty, then we know that there's more to it. So she does have the BD reversals, so dad becomes bad. Sometimes he is. Right? But dad becomes bad, and when she really doesn't know how to spell, she will use invented spelling. And she'll be able to read the word to you with her invented spelling, but it's invented. And of course, we were asked the question yesterday, right? Who decided that this is the way a word needs to be spelled? But I mean, spelling is an invention. Written language is an invention. We invented it about recently till the point where we decided that drawings weren't enough. We said, okay, we've got to start adding, the oral tradition wasn't enough. We started adding in this concept of spelling. And even that's evolved, even in the English language, the way we spell certain words. So she would invent her spelling, which of course is no help to her in school. And when it came to writing, this was something the school required her to do. They had to journal every week, right? And tell a story and experience something. And she would have this very rich idea based on the experiences that she has. But she would not be able to communicate that in her writing because she knows she won't know how to spell some of the words. So what you end up with is a very simple version, a very simplified version of the true experience she wanted to share. Which is a shame, because, you know, if she could really say what she wanted to say, if we could just ignore the spelling, then we would really get to know Tara a lot better. Tara copies very slowly, be it from the blackboard or from a piece of paper. So you can imagine, her friends are done, they're out at recess, running around, you know, as they do. She's still finishing up her work. She copies very slowly also because she is a very neat and meticulous person. She wants to ensure that her handwriting is perfect, that the work that she has done is perfect. So besides the fact that copying is difficult, she's also putting a lot of pressure on herself to make sure that the work she produces is as perfect as it can be. So she copies very slowly. When it came to conversations, even her verbal responses were a little challenging for her. She would take time to process the question, and after she processed the question, she'll tell you. So it could be something simple. Okay, what did you do in school today? Right? And most kids will tell you, oh, yeah, it was fine. You know, this teacher scolded me, and it was very straightforward. But she would be telling you her experiences. This happened in the school bus, and you'd have to ask so many questions to get the coherence out of that message. It was all over the place. And some of us are patient enough. We would ask the questions, but some of us aren't, and we just go, okay, all right, thank you. I mean, again, an example would be between siblings, right? When a sibling is slow in responding to something, another sibling will quickly jump in and go, okay, let me just tell you. It's that sort of thing. So she did have challenges, even when it came with communication. I mentioned she's meticulous, I mentioned she's hardworking. If you are familiar with Singapore math, we have diagramming and modeling. These are important aspects of Singapore math. So she would follow the teacher's instructions to a T. Use a ruler. My son, for example, would draw it just like that. And I'll say, that doesn't look like a square. And he's like, who cares? I'm not measuring. But she would use a ruler and she would draw it out. And, you know, she would follow the instructions, but she'll forget the steps sometimes. And so she'll get the answers wrong. Sometimes she would have done her working beautifully. The answer is 23, she'll write 32. Gets it wrong. Doesn't matter that the working's correct, the answer's wrong. Yeah? And maybe because of her verbal or her communication difficulties, Tara was very shy. She wouldn't speak much unless, you know, you really call on to her and she knows you very well. And friendships were very challenging. I mean, if even adults can get impatient, right? When, you know, children are not answering you in the way you expect them to, can you imagine children would also get frustrated, right? So she had very few friends, and she'd come and she'd say, I don't know how people make friends. I don't know how come there's a clique. I mean, I don't know how they do it. But she was very shy. And the teachers would tell us, she'd be sitting in the classroom with the worksheet in front of her, and she wouldn't be doing anything. But because Tara didn't want to call attention to herself, right? She didn't want to ask her friend for help. She didn't want to ask her classmate for help or her teacher for help, because that's calling attention to herself. She was afraid that the teacher might say, I taught this yesterday, you forgot? So she would just be staring at that piece of paper And the teachers would get upset. They would say, she's not doing her work, she's not trying. But there were reasons for that. And if we investigated, we may have understood. So now it's over to you, okay? How many of you think Tara is struggling in school? Thank you. Yes, yes, she's struggling in school, clearly, right? Not an experience you want for any child. How many of you think that Tara is at risk or might have an SLD like dyslexia? Yeah. Thank you. So, naturally, we felt that way. And so what do we do when we think that a child might have an SLD? We send them for a psychological assessment. That's what the parents did. They sent her for a psychological assessment. So I'm going to give you the information that came out of the psychological assessment. As you can see, her full-scale IQ score came up as high average, right? Other than the similarity subtest, and I know there are lots of psychs here, so I may not need to explain this, but it's really about how two words conceptually relate, right? Other than the similarity subtest, everything is high average. Look at her working memory, very high. Then you look at her oral reading accuracy, below average, but the overall total literacy assessment score was average. Okay, back to you. Do you still think she has an SLD? How many of you say yes? Lesser hands this time, right? That's the power of a psychological assessment, isn't it? Just now when I described you to her, you guys were confident and certain that, no, this child definitely does have an SLD. But once you throw in the psychological assessment evaluation, we go, maybe not then. Right? But I'm going to give you more information. This is what the child, through the parent, and the teachers and the educational psychologists had to say. So, the parent said, Tara is extremely enthusiastic. She always wants to try. She always wants to do her best work. She's very hardworking. She's very imaginative. Those were all true. The teacher said, well, she's meeting expectations. 2 out of 10 in a spelling test. Okay, all right, meeting expectations. She's not above average, but she's all right, she's coping. Plus, she has all these good qualities. She's hardworking, she's attentive, she's cooperative. You know, she'll figure it out. You know, and there are children who are weaker than her, don't worry. I never understood that. Well, you say that children are weaker than her, don't worry. I mean, this is not a competition, guys, right? Every child deserves the best, right? So, but that's what they said. But the parents shared this, which is actually very, very pitiful. Tara would get anxious before any sort of assessment, right? So spelling test, for an example, right? She'll get anxious. The day before, she'll already be nervous. You can see her hands shaking as she's practicing. You can see that she's thinking, oh no, what's going to happen tomorrow? She's only 8, guys, right? And sometimes when, you get a 1 out of 10 or a 2 out of 10, the teachers will insist that you bring that sheet to the parents to sign, to acknowledge, because they want the parents to know, look, this is how badly your child's doing. You've got to help her, you've got to make her work harder, right? Try harder, right? You've got to make her work harder. And so, when she has to do that, because she's obedient, she will bring that sheet of paper and she will start to cry almost immediately. Not the tantrum kind of crying, just tears streaming down her cheeks. And she will say, I'm sorry, I'll try harder. Using the same lingo that the teachers have told her, right? So I'll try harder, I'll do better next time, I promise. And that really breaks my heart. But what did the educational psychologist find? That she does not display characteristics of a specific learning disability. So all of you who didn't raise your hands, you were right. That's what the psych report found. She did not display, she doesn't have dyslexia, that's what they said. She doesn't have an SLD. So with this, I'm going to introduce you to the world of individuals who learn differently, but are not always diagnosed with a specific learning difference. The struggle is there, but they don't have that label. Now, I must stress, I'm not anti-label. Okay, a diagnosis or a label does come with advantages and benefits. You can get accommodations, you can fight for support, you can advocate for your child. There is a way for you to say, she belongs to a community of people. So when I say that a child is dyslexic, I can say, look, so is Mr. Abhishek Bachchan. Why are you so worried? But when you don't have a label, you can't do that. So I'm not anti-label. But what happens to children who don't meet that criteria? What happens to children who are in what I call a liminal space, hovering between the boundaries of a child who has a learning difference and a child who is struggling? So this is the first group that I'm going to introduce you to. But here's the presentation content. For those of you who'd like to know what I'm going to be talking about, we're going to find out who these individuals are, individuals who learn differently. And you will see that I will slip ILD here and there. That's because individuals who learn differently, it's a mouthful. And I'm gonna stumble on my own words. Okay, so when I say ILD, try to remember that's what I mean, individuals who learn differently. We're gonna look at the presence of ILDs, children without diagnosis. We're going to look if specialist intervention, the kind of intervention that we provide to children with dyslexia is gonna benefit such children. And then we're gonna look at giftedness. And here, you know, teachers, we have eyes in the back of our heads, right? We know what mischief some kids are going to get up to when we're going to be writing on the board. But that's because we understand, right? And I can see that some of you may be thinking, why is she talking about giftedness? I'm talking about children who are struggling. I hopefully will show you how that connects, okay? And then we'll look at what we can do, and finally inclusion. Now it's a 90-minute presentation. Some of you might start fading at about 60 minutes, and if I'm entertaining enough, maybe 75 minutes. So I'm glad that inclusion is right at the end, because we had an excellent session yesterday on inclusion in UDL, and we have another one today. So if you do need to take a cognitive break, take it at this point, okay? All right, let's go on to who. Who are ILDs? So the term individuals who learn differently is an umbrella term. It includes those who are formally diagnosed with an SLD, but it also includes those who do not have a formal diagnosis or meet all of the criteria for a formal diagnosis. So think about it this way, they just don't tick all of the boxes. They tick some, but not enough to qualify as a child with SLD. But the thing is, like children with SLD, ILDs without a diagnosis will benefit from supplementary support because they are struggling. And why does this happen? Well, there are three broad reasons for why this could happen. One is their learning difficulty or difference is late emerging. It surfaces later in their life. One is the late identification. Another is asynchronous profiles, elevated in some areas, suppressed or depressed in other areas. I'm already seeing a yawn. I'm sorry if I'm boring some of you. I'll try to be more lively. Okay, and when this happens, what's causing this? Some of them are instructional casualties. You're in a classroom environment where these things just don't get picked up. So we call them instructional casualties. Some of them they're masking their difficulties. And that's because they have certain strengths that help cover some of the difficulties that they have so they don't get spotted. Some of them have compensatory skills. And we used to joke in the center, you know, we used to say, yeah, you know what my kid's compensatory strategy is? Copying from his best friend. Another one would say, yeah, parroting. Look for the brightest kid in class, see what the kid is saying, and then you just parrot, just mimic, and you'll be fine. But these compensatory strategies are not going to take you through life. We need to have right compensatory strategies, but sometimes it's because of these compensatory strategies that they sort of just go under the radar. And of course, it's the severity of difficulties. And when I talk to teachers who work with children who have learning differences, and these teachers really, really care, right? The severity of the difficulty plays a very important role to them. The weakest of the weak must get support first. And then you start to say, okay, how can I help the others? So if you just have a mild or moderate kind of difficulty, the statement, or their kids were weaker than her in the classroom, right? You know, if you have such children, then they don't get picked up. Now, put a pin on this slide because I'm going to come back to this. Okay, so just like a something happened. Okay, now, presence. Yesterday we heard a wonderful talk by Dr. Martin, and he was sharing with us the presence of dyslexia, the prevalence rates of dyslexia, and it's all over the place. right? But the useful thing about understanding prevalence is numbers don't lie, or so they say. Okay, it's up to you to decide. But they say numbers don't lie. It gives you some sense of power. It gives you a sense of being able to say, okay, this percentage, we've got to do something about this. If the numbers are small, you don't really have that kind of power. So let's try and understand presence. How many individuals who learn differently without a diagnosis exist? So I looked at international studies. And in their studies on literacy difficulties, a third of their sample were not diagnosed with any kind of learning difference. A third of the sample. Marie Clay, the founder of Reading Recovery, way back in 1987 gave this breakdown. She said 70% of students would probably go through their academic or educational journey without much difficulty. And then you have the remaining 30%. 10% might be identified as SEN or have SLD. Then you have the remaining 20% who will have intermittent struggles and will still benefit from supplementary support. So if you're looking at a group of ILDs who do not have a diagnosis, Marie Clay suggests it's about 20%. Now at the DAS, we conduct assessments, or DAS, as our host mentioned just now, right? So we conduct assessments, and you must remember, we're the Dyslexia Association of Singapore. So the people who come to us are already inclined to believe their child has dyslexia, or someone has already prompted them, right? Okay, I think you need to go for an assessment because I think your child has dyslexia. So we're looking at a biased sample of sorts. And yet, out of that, 30% of the students will not be found dyslexic. Okay, so already a biased population, and yet 30% are not found to have dyslexia. But within that 30%, 50% of those students, when you read the psych report, will be recommended to receive interventions similar to those who have SLD. So you read the report and you see the recommendations, and it will say, you know, try to attend phonics classes, improve on phonological awareness, the same sort of recommendations that you would see for the children with SLD. So let's put this all together, okay? International studies, 33%. Marie Clay, 20%. DAS, 15%. So in a very simplistic sort of manner, if I average it all out, we're looking at about 23% of individuals who learn differently who will not get a diagnosis. Now in a class of 30, that's about 67 students. It's not a small number. So now we look at outcome. What can we do for this group of students? So we did a case study, and I'm going to share with you the interim findings. The project is over. I could share with you the full findings, but in fact there's a journal paper which I can also share. I will share it so that it can be circulated. We had different groups of students, different age groups, different grade levels. I'm only going to show you one, because if I show you all, it's going to get a bit complex, and also because we were teaching them different things. I'm going to focus on the grade 4, or the primary 4 students. And we worked with a non-profit organization. They identified these students for us, and they said, these students need the extra support. Can you help them? And we had a funder who was willing to explore this with us. All of the students that were identified to be a part of this case study were profiled, because we don't want to start from ground zero. We want to start from where the child is at. They don't have the time for us to start from ground zero. We start from where the child is at and fill in the gaps. So they were all profiled so that we can understand their needs. And the findings that I'm going to share were over a period of 9 weeks. Okay, the outcome of 9 weeks of intervention, approximately 18 hours of intervention. The program we used is iReach, which is a literacy program delivered primarily through vocabulary instruction, but covers areas like reading comprehension, reading, spelling, etc. So I'm going to show you what we found. I'm going to zoom in straight to the spelling. These are 10-year-olds, and we already dropped the profiler to a grade below. Okay? So if they were not able to spell at the 3rd grade, we dropped them to the 2nd grade until the discontinue rule applied. Okay, so the signs of frustration, or we realized that, okay, this, we need to stop. This is not healthy for the child. And if you just look at the spelling, one child got 1 word correct. The rest of the children couldn't spell a single word. After 9 weeks of intervention, 18 hours of intervention, you can see the dramatic change. From 0 to 17. And we're not just talking about words here, right? We're talking about concepts, phonograms, spelling rules, syllabication. Each word contains these components, and they've acquired this knowledge and can apply it to spelling now. So all of the areas showed improvement, and this is just our our interim data. The complete data, like I said, I can share the journal article with you. But this tells us that, yeah, we can help these children using the methods that we've been taught. We also learn two things: connections and technology. Okay? Yesterday we were asked the question, will teaching or teachers become redundant? Right? It really depends on what you consider teaching to be and who you consider teachers to be. If you think teachers are the ones who are just filling a vessel with information, like children are tabula rasa, right, and blank slates, and then here I am, the all-knowing other, giving you all this information, then yes, I think we will become redundant. But if we see ourselves as coaches, as people who are grooming and facilitating that learning, I don't see that happening, because the human connection is so important. And we discovered it during this study. This group of kids, we built student-to-student relationships. They became comfortable with each other. The teacher had an excellent rapport with them. He worked hard to make that happen. Imagine 4 girls, male teacher. How hard he must have had to work. But he managed to do it, right? And children then were willing to make mistakes. They were willing to try and fail. We made it a safe environment, or as Ms. Swapna told me, we removed the threat.
Vishwas told me, I won't take credit for it, but Vishwas taught me.
Okay, so but she was my guru on that one. So we removed the threat, made it a safe environment for them where they could make mistakes and continue to learn. What are we building? We're building resilience. We're building accepting making mistakes and accepting failure and persistence. We also realized that success begets success. And again, yesterday at the presentation, we heard that celebrate small victories, right? So with every small success, small steps that they were making, they begin to see themselves differently and realize that, okay, I can do this. All right, let's try another one. Let's try a harder one. And this is akin to Bandura's mastery experiences, which is seen to be the most efficient and effective way to build self-confidence. So human connection, very important, cannot be done without, no matter how great your AI augmented programming might be. And that's what we found. But still, we're not shaming technology in any way. We found technology to be very useful too, because we used technology as a way to complement the content that was being taught. And it's exciting for them because the traditional pen and paper approach is what they experience in school all the time. Getting a chance, with friends to be able to use technology is exciting. We call them digital natives. I don't know what they are now. We've got toddlers swiping away, knowing how to take pictures. So, they're more than digital natives, I think. And we also found that gamification using online tools. And this one I have to thank COVID for as well, because a lot of development work started because of this. Home-based learning forced us to use technology. And so a lot of people developed and even shared freely content online. And so the gamification element, you can use, of course, cards and manipulatives, more tactile sort of approach. But a lot of this is available already online. So we use those quizzes, we use that kind of content, and they enjoyed coming to class, which is, of course, half the battle won. And any intervention program can only be as good as the person who's delivering it. Right? I mean, so we had to ask the teachers, what does it feel like? Because you are trained to teach children with dyslexia. There's a comfort blanket with the psychological report, because you can read through the subtest scores, and then you can look at the recommendation. You kind of feel safe that you know this group of people. But they were going in blind, so they said it felt like they were digging in the dark. But it was also complex, because we don't really know why they were struggling with learning. Because there could be multiple variables, right? For instance, if I borrow Frith's causal modeling framework, it could be biological, it could be cognitive, it could be behavioral, it could be environmental, we don't know. But But they also said that they revealed similar challenges. So above the iceberg, what you see, right? They revealed similar challenges as those who had dyslexia, who have dyslexia. They had weaknesses in isolated aspects like phonological awareness, they had some working memory issues, and they also found that there was limited or no benefit when they attended tuition. Now, I do need to explain tuition, it may be culturally loaded here. In Singapore, when we talk about tuition, what we mean is curriculum-based intervention worksheets. Okay, so I'll bring a revision book. You get loads of them in Singapore, right? In any bookstore, you go in, you can buy them, and you sit down and you do page after page after page. And you know, when you struggle, I tell you, okay, this is how you do it. What's happening in school? It's happening in tuition. So they found no advantage, no benefits when it came to attending tuition. We realized, therefore, the benefits came from evidence-based practices from SLD and the highly trained therapists that were going in there to deliver, who, without even knowing what's causing this child to struggle, were able to find ways to help them overcome some of their difficulties. We therefore discovered that profiling was critical. We do need to profile, we need to begin to form an understanding about the child. And being an investigative educator was also critical. We had to keep inquiring, we had to talk to the teachers, we had to talk to the parents, we had to talk to the child. And that was a constant process. But one teacher told me, actually it's no different from teaching children with dyslexia, because we have to do that too. We have to constantly investigate. Because, you know, day one they come to us, they're not the same in day 30. We're all like that, we all evolve. So she said, it's no different from teaching those with dyslexia. Now, this slide wraps up my first story in my anthology. We know that there are individuals who learn differently. In fact, someone told me, Geetha, everyone learns differently. I say, yeah, we do. But some of us struggle. Some of us don't. So we all learn differently, but when you struggle, the question is, do we stand by and say, well, sorry, my dear, you don't have a diagnostic label, or you don't have dyslexia or dyspraxia or whatever, so, you know, try harder. Or do we act? So this wraps up the first profile of individuals who learn differently, those without a diagnosis and they struggle. I'm on to my second big idea. How am I doing for time? Not too good, okay. All right, what's this guy doing? Can you see? That's right. Mining, right? Yeah, gold mining, excellent. So when you're gold mining, what are you looking for? Not the dirt? You want the gold. Okay, all right, so you're looking for gold, not dirt. Right? Gold. Okay, now, let me ask you something. In our education system, and I speak for Singapore as well when I talk about this, in our education system, do we look for gold? I hear some disagreement.
We look for the mistake. Yeah.
I'm going to argue that our education system sits firmly in a deficit paradigm. It's a deficit paradigm. Why do I say that? Which child gets attention? Which child gets support? It's a child who is struggling, the weakest of the weak. I spoke to a group of 20 teachers, and I said, okay, if you in a class you have so many students, right? Everyone's a diverse learner. I mean, we all have different ways of learning things. Which child gets most of your time? Which child do you pay more attention to? Except for one teacher, everyone said the LD child. Okay, the LD child. And in fact, this was a group of preschool teachers, so even the LD label wasn't there. But basically, they're telling me it's the child who has a learning difference, a significant learning difference. And when I pushed them, I prompted them to explain why. Some of these reasons came up, and it's supported by the literature. So I'm going to share with you. One of the things they said is, I am aware of the strengths my children have. I'm aware that they do have their strengths, but the emphasis is on deficit support. There is an important message here. You know they are good at some things, but what you choose to focus on is the deficit. That's what they say. And this is, like I said, It's also supported by the literature. Some said deficits must be rectified first before they can address strengths. Many years ago, many years ago, as a new teacher, someone told me that you cannot teach reading comprehension before the child can read. And now we know that's not the case. You can teach it simultaneously. You might have to be a bit creative, but reading and reading comprehension can go together. You don't wait for the child to be able to read before you do comprehension strategies, right? So similarly, do we really need to rectify the deficits first before we can address the strengths? A question for you to think about. Now, an overemphasis on weakness results in students feeling inadequate. Another story for you. So within that group, a teacher was talking to me about, she was sharing this story. So she has a student who is highly artistic, loves to draw. During break time, that's what he would do. He would draw. And so when she was teaching this phonetically irregular word, we call them sight words, red flag words, whatever term we choose to use, right? What he would do is he would draw out the word, not write, draw out the word, and then he will doodle around that. What he is doing is he's visually, almost in a logographic way, trying to remember what that word looks like, and the doodles are to help him understand what that word means. Okay, so this child was doing this so often, and the teacher thought, hey, I must share this with the parent. Okay, so class is over, she takes out one sheet of his work, and she brings it, and she's having a conversation with the parents. She says, hey, look at this work, that he has done. It's brilliant. And the first response of the parent was to turn to the child and say, you mean you don't know how to spell this word? Oh, heartbreaking, right? Of course, the teacher did some service, damage control, service recovery, and tried to moderate the situation because she's worried for the kid, right? And then when the teacher observed the parent leave the center and wait for the lift, she saw her throw the sheet of paper into the dustbin. Actual story. So she was, of course, miserable. But imagine how the child feels. Inadequate hardly covers it, I think. But if we focus on, you mean you can't even spell that word, instead of, wow, now that's quite a clever way of learning something, then of course the child feels inadequate. And then there's this last bit. Strengths as compensatory enables the acquisition of curriculum. So I use the strengths, and I hear this very often. Using the strengths to build on the weaknesses, to help, help manage the weaknesses. Now, yes, it can be seen that way, but what it also means is that the ability is not maximized. It's a means to an end. Your strengths is a means to an end. But because the end is still deficits. So, I'm going to say that, unlike mining, our education system sometimes looks for dirt, because we want to fix the problem. Okay? And that's perhaps why Mr. Abhishek Bachchan, who was diagnosed at the age of 9 to have dyslexia, says this: it's important to recognize the problem in the field of education, and this indifference shown to slow learners should be stemmed. Now, of course, this happened years ago. We've evolved ever since. There's greater awareness about SLD. But the term indifference, what does that mean? It means we don't care. Why? Because we are seeking normal. We are convinced that normal is the way to be. And so when you have deficits, my job is to make you normal. Yeah. And even the terminology, slow learners, tells you that, okay, you're a slow learner. Maybe 5-10 years you'll get it. But I've got to focus on the normal. That's what we want. And another, Saurabh Sachdeva, he has done a lot of talks. I believe some of them are on YouTube. He's talked about his experiences with dyslexia and how he was bullied. Why do children with SLD or with difficulties in school get bullied? Because their peers don't understand. But sometimes it's not just the peers who are bullying. Sometimes the teachers are bullying them, right? Saying, how come you don't know this? I'll go stand in the corner. I was sharing with some of them, my time dusters will go flying. Right? No whiteboard, that time it was blackboard, right? Dusters will go flying, books will go thrown out the window. I have seen, maybe not, less than 10 years ago, a teacher tearing up a piece of a child's work and throwing it to the dustbin because it did not meet her expectations, right? So bullying happens because, again, what are we looking for? We're looking for normal. We're looking for this idea that every child must be at this baseline, right? And when children are not at this baseline, that gets us frustrated, we're stressed. We say, no, we've got to do something about it. We've got to fix the problem. But so, I want to ask you this question, okay? How many of you as teachers can see that your children have strengths? Thank you very much, okay. We all know that a learning difference has no relationship to one's intelligence. Unless you have intellectual disability, there's no connection between one's intelligence and a learning difference. Which leads us to this question, what is intelligence? Right? Okay, so you may have read recently about this professor whose tenure was cancelled because he stood by his belief of the eugenics movement, right? Where, you know, abilities were innate and inherited and so many human atrocities were conducted in the name of eugenics. When I was an early trainer in the early days, what I would do is, and I thought it was quite clever, what I would do is I'd put a picture of William Shakespeare and I'll put a picture of Picasso. And then I'll ask the teachers, who's more intelligent? And you can see some of them will be visibly uncomfortable. They'll be like, squirming in their seats, going like, do I have to answer that? And I will force them, of course, to answer it. And they would say, William Shakespeare. When they had to, they would say, okay, William Shakespeare, no choice. And I'll say, why? And the reason is because we live in a literate society and language is the means through which you demonstrate your intelligence. But is that so? I mean, we've been asking this question for ages, yeah? What is intelligence? And now we throw into the mix artificial intelligence. A colleague of mine attended a conference on AI, and the presenter asked this question, what is real intelligence now that we have artificial intelligence? Oh my, like we haven't even solved the what is intelligent question, and now you've got the AI question coming in? I don't know. But like I said, we've been talking about this for ages. So I'm going to share with you some seemingly old theories, but I think they still remain relevant because we need to think about them. So in 1978, Renzulli came up with this. Of course, he's updated it. The latest I've read is in 2019. He's on LinkedIn, guys, still posting stuff. So, you know, feel free to connect with him and, you know, you get to read his stuff for free. Now, I'm not really going to talk about this diagram, but I'm just going to share with you two things he said, which I find fascinating because it was said in 1978. He talked about two types of giftedness, okay? And so intelligence, yeah, two types. The schoolhouse gifted are the students who ace their exams. They know how to take the test. They know how to learn to pass the test. Schoolhouse giftedness. But he also introduced the idea of the creative, productive gifted. These are the people who can come up with original ideas, think up original ideas, and produce these original ideas. So all of a sudden now, it's not just about the context of being able to pass your exams in schools. It's about being able to come up with new and novel ways of thinking, new and novel ways of presenting information. So in 1978, mind you, we already have a sense that intelligence is not as simple as the G factor, right? The IQ score. We know this, I think, quite well, very famous, right? The theory of multiple intelligences. Some say there's 8, some say there's 9, I don't know, whichever you prefer, you pick. And suddenly now we have visual spatial, we have musical intelligence. So Picasso, Guernica, work of art, a work of a genius, I would say. So yes, multiple ways where you can define yourself as being intelligent. Or maybe I should add that student too, right? For him to have the meta-awareness that he learns this particular way and the ability to then produce it, he's intelligent. Now Sternberg talked about the triachic theory of human intelligence. And just very quickly to explain, analytic intelligence, again, I'm going to be very simplistic about this. Analytic intelligence is your ability to critically evaluate what you're seeing, what you're observing, what you're reading. The creative intelligence talks about your ability to respond, like what your responses are like. And that, again, could be similar to the creative productive in Rinzuli's theory. It could be just the way you are able to simulate the responses to meet something that's unique in front of you. But what really fascinates me about this one is the practical intelligence, external. You see, the thing about intelligence is, it's based on what society values. Okay, so let's talk about the first industrial revolution, right? During the first industrial revolution, what was valued? Strength. We needed people who could work hard. We needed strong, able-bodied men. We're at the fourth industrial revolution now. What is the most important thing? Technological innovations. I don't need you to be beefy. I don't need you to be able to lift a tent or a house or whatever. I need you to be able to manage with the technological innovations, come up with creative solutions. So society's definition of what is important and valuable shifts. And with the external world, what that society values becomes intelligence. So, in a school, what you value. If you value acing exams, and if you value being perfect with your work, then that becomes intelligence. But if you're a street kid, surviving on the road, surviving on the streets, street smart becomes practical intelligence. Now, if I am put on the streets and expected to survive, I'll be the stupidest one there. I'm not trained, I'm not intelligent, I can't cope with that environment. But lucky for me, the society that I lived in values examinations and results and degrees more. And thankfully, it worked out for me. But I find this interesting, because what this does is it shifts the focus from the individual to us deciding what intelligence is. And I like that, because that means that we can change what we think intelligence is. And just to take it a little bit further, this is from Gagne, and again, updated, started in 1985. He said giftedness, and again, when I say giftedness, I'm also talking about intelligence in general. He said giftedness is something that is innate. So some of us can sing, born with the ability to sing. We can carry a tune, we're not tone deaf. But what turns that gift into a talent is the grooming, the practice, and a platform to showcase. So if I'm a singer, if I can sing, my kids can tell, okay, my parents can tell, okay, I can sing. And then they send me for vocal training. They give me an opportunity to perform, schools or, any sort of stage. And I'm groomed to become a better singer. Then that gift becomes a talent. But if they do nothing about it, right? And yeah, maybe I can carry a tune, but it doesn't become a talent. And when it doesn't become a talent, then I can't use it. Think about it. It's just something I can do. But I can't really thrive with that gift that has been given to me. So, based on all of these ideas, what I believe, and I think you will agree with me, is that building assets, building strengths, turning the strengths into talents, while supporting needs is what we need to do. So in no way, again, am I saying ignore the problem, as in the deficits, the weaknesses, the things that cause the child to struggle, but flip the narrative. Okay, so flip the narrative. Look at a child as able first and disabled later. Look at the child as having strengths first, weaknesses later. Just that mental shift will change the way we work with children. Now, Norman Geschwind, we know, he said the extraordinary brain of the dyslexic makes it difficult for them to learn to do what we consider to be foundational skills, like reading, spelling, etc. But it's also that extraordinary brain that helps them excel in certain areas. I was telling the team again, dyslexia is known as the MIT disease. There's so many dyslexics in MIT. Many years ago, during the war, dyslexics were hired to be cryptographers or cryptologists, I forget the term. Cryptographers, yes. So they would, because they would be able to think the same way that they needed to, and that people who don't have that sort of brain functioning can. Just think of Dr. Martin's presentation yesterday. I told him, I said, I noticed, I didn't praise. I told him, I said, you know, I didn't know where you were going till you came to the last slide. Because only your brain could have come up with that. So we know that the dyslexic brain has certain, you know, issues with certain things that we consider normal, but they also have this extraordinary ability to do some things. Helen Taylor, very recent research paper, she spoke about the evolution of complementary cognition, and she argues that with evolution, the way these stages are in every era of the world's, you know, development, certain things are being valued, and she believes it's an evolutionary trait, and that the dyslexics will rule the world. So I mean that's me putting it simply. But it's the dyslexic brain that's going to rule the world. And if you think about the fourth industrial revolution being technological innovations, and you think about the way a dyslexic brain works, I don't think I can argue with her. And her research is very convincing, and I encourage you to read it. So, I wrap this up by saying, promoting assets in all children must be the goal. Flip the narrative, okay? I did say that, I'll come back to this slide, because I want to talk about masking of difficulties, right? And this is where you guys were raising your eyebrows going, why is Geetha going to talk about giftedness? We talked about one group of ILDs, those without a diagnosis, and I'm going to introduce you to another group of ILDs, those who have giftedness and a learning difference. These students are called twice exceptional. Sometimes they're multi-exceptional, but we'll stick with twice for now, okay? All right, so we know learning difficulties exist, learning differences, learning disabilities, whichever you choose to use. We know that exists. We also know giftedness exists, but they've always remained in two separate spheres, working on their own trajectory. Never the twain shall meet. Kipling said that, right? But is that the case? We understand about neurotypical children. We know that they develop in a predictable manner, whatever that means, okay? But it's the atypical students who puzzle us, right? They're the enigma. We're trying to figure out how we're going to work with them. And what's interesting is that unbeknownst to us, we carry with us certain stereotypes. Again, I stress, I have no issues with labels, but labels carry stereotypes. We must be mindful of that. Classification is necessary because human existence is complex. And so in order for us to make sense of human existence, we do need certain categorizations and classifications. Yeah? But what also accompanies that support system of being able to understand that complexity is certain biases. They exist. So there was a study done where a profile of a child who is both gifted and has a learning difference was given to a group of teachers. So 3 groups of teachers were given that profile. One group, no label, just blank. This is the profile. Second group, the label was LD. Third group, the label was gifted. The teachers who received the profile with the gifted label could tell, when they were asked to talk about it, we're talking about all the strengths the gifted child has. You know, this is wonderful, this is amazing, it's all good. The teachers whose profile had the LD label, oh, these are all the challenges the children have, we've got to fix this problem, we've got to fix that problem, we've got to help them here. The teachers who didn't have the label were able to pick out both, holistically. They were able to say, okay, so these are some areas of strengths, these are some areas of weaknesses, and we might be able to. What this shows us is that the label already comes with a preconceived notion. And it forces the way we think. It directs us, it guides us to think in that way, and that's what I think we need to be mindful of. A friend of mine was explaining this to me. One of our common friends has a child who has been identified as gifted. And I should say in Singapore, for you to be identified as gifted, you gotta ace the test, basically. That's how you are identified as gifted. You go through an English paper, a maths paper, and if you do very well, then you go through a second round. Again, it's an examination paper, and then when you do that well, you go into the gifted education program. Okay? So we have a common friend whose child is gifted, and we always hear people going, "Wow, you're so lucky. You know, your son is gifted." Right? And she has a daughter who is a national athlete. Okay? But she has dyslexia. The daughter has dyslexia. So when she was talking to us about this, she said she shared this with a family friend. They said, "Oh no, my daughter has dyslexia." And the family friend reached out, touched her hand and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." I mean, I appreciate the gesture of empathy because it's not an easy life, I get that. But she told me that offended her. For her to assume that my child, because my child has dyslexia, it's going to be a terrible life for my child. So, gifted, all good. LD, all bad. It's not true. Dr. Desai will tell you that the gifted too require intervention, and they do have challenges as well. But that's for another day for Dr. Desai to present. And of course, when we talk about twice exceptionality, we're talking about both occurring at the same time. So for those of you who are more visual, you might want to look at this instead of hearing me talk. This is what twice exceptionality is the convergence of these two skills. And the website is there. It's a very simple read. It's easy for anyone to understand. I like this website. It makes it easier for me to explain twice exceptionality to people. So do take a look. He also does like webcasts and webinars. So if you ever feel like it, do join. It's an American take on twice exceptionality, but it doesn't matter. We take what we need to take from that conversation. And of course, I'm sorry, did anyone want to take a picture of that? Okay, here we go. You guys will get the deck, I promise you. Okay. Is it all right if I change? Yes. Yeah? I see someone still holding their phone. Are we good? Okay. And of course, I do need to show you some stats because, like, you know, numbers don't lie, right? So, again, no consensus. Just like with dyslexia, SLD, there's no consensus. You pick the stats you like, okay? So, 14% of gifted children have learning differences in Australia. That's one. 300,000 twice exceptional children in the US. That's another. A range of 2 to 5% of gifted children as having learning difference and children who have been identified as having learning differences, having giftedness or being gifted, 2 to 5%. And at the DAS, what we did was we looked at all the psychological reports and making certain adjustments to the way we would evaluate giftedness, right? Because there is a standard and we know that the learning difficulty might suppress some scores. So making certain adjustments to that, we found that 4% of, we teach about 3,000 to 4,500 students if we combine all of our programs together, that 4% of them might be twice exceptional. So what are we doing for the twice exceptional learners? But another important concept that we need to understand when it comes to twice exceptionality is asynchronous development. Not all students are standard, they all don't grow the same way. We know this. And that the important thing is that the development in some areas is not at the same rate as the development in other areas. And there is a discrepancy, a very evident discrepancy between challenges and gifts. But what's more important, there are 3 categories of twice exceptional or twice exceptionality. So you've got the diagnosed gifted, so those who have been identified as gifted, but with undetected learning differences. Then you've got those who are diagnosed with the learning difference, but undetected giftedness. This group is very large. The second group is very large. That's what the research tells us. And then you have the learning difference and the giftedness just masking each other until this child comes across as an average student. An average Joe, as they would say. And nothing spectacular, not much trouble, but just, you'll be all right. So what happens in this situation where one is recognized and the other isn't? right? So if I were to give you an example, let's take a child who has been identified as gifted, but has undetected learning difficulties. They go into the gifted education program, for example, and the expectations are high. But then they struggle, right? They may have to work like doubly hard or 8 times harder even to keep up. And suddenly you feel stupid. You feel like, I don't belong here. I'm in the wrong place. 10 minutes remaining, it's not gonna happen. What am I gonna do? I'm only at my second point. Okay, all right. Oh dear, all right. Well, the point is it leads to confusion. And, you know, if you think about adults who experience this, what that means is that they come across as intelligent, but then people who don't understand this will say you're underperforming, you're not willing to work. What's the term now? Quiet quitting. Right? There's another one, I forget what it is. Silent quitting or slow quitting, something to that effect. Right? So that's what they think you're doing. That's not the case. And with children, the thing about being intelligent or gifted, so having that meta-awareness or meta-cognition, means you are acutely aware of what you can and cannot do. They're not puppets. They just, you know, they do have a sense of feeling, a sense of an ability to understand it. And so they realize they are unable to do certain things, and they are misunderstood because they're given the wrong advice. They feel all alone because they don't know anybody else who has that same experience as them. And the worst of all is the shame they feel when they cannot keep up. The shame they feel when they're in a class that is focused on deficits as a learning different child, as a child with SLD, but knowing that, you know what, if you gave me a chance, I'm going to show you, I'm going to blow you away. I can be brilliant. And because I have 10 minutes, I'm skipping this. But basically I'm saying, oh sorry, I saw someone stressed. Basically, this slide simply shows you that giftedness can coexist with many learning differences. This is not a complete list, of course. There's ODD, there's social, emotional, behavioral difficulties, etc. But basically, it's that coexistence, right, of intelligence, giftedness, and learning differences. But the point here is diversity is the name of the game. We know this because when we work with SLD kids, we know that they don't always come with just one concern. According to the research, approximately 50% of these students will have comorbid issues. 50% approximately, that's a large number, which means the children that you are working with who may come with just a dyslexia diagnosis may not only be dyslexic. They may have other challenges, right? And that might be conflicting with what you're doing with them, and that might be the reason why you're moving slower with this child than with another child. But if diversity is the name of the game, why not add in giftedness? That's my plea to you. Think about it. And so, as I wrap up this second big idea, and in 10 minutes go through another 2, impossible. Okay, so basically at this point, what I would like to say is that you know one group of ILDs, those who are diagnosed with dyslexia or any kind of SLD. Another group of ILDs, those who are struggling but don't have a diagnosis. Now you know a third group of ILDs, those who are gifted and have a learning difference. Individuals who learn differently. And I have to bring it together, but I'm going to skip this. It was meant to be an activity, but I do really want to, okay. No, but I have 10 minutes, and you do have a session on social emotional learning.
That video, I think, the last.
Oh, really? I must go there? Okay, but okay. Oh, I feel so bad. All right. Can I take just a little bit more time? Can you guys bear with me for a little bit longer? Okay, thank you so much. Okay, what can we do? So I'm going to skip that social emotional one. Basically, the question I was going to ask you is which child would you rather have in your classroom? And basically, social emotional health leads to confidence, resilience, and leads to success. And that's something we need to build. So it's not just about content knowledge. It's about feeling like a whole person. Okay? So what can we do? All of you can read this, right? Now, what I want you to know is that we appreciate you. I appreciate you. Your child appreciates you. So give yourself, if you don't want to give yourself a physical hug, that's fine. Give yourself a mental hug. You guys are doing a wonderful job. Just caring enough to be here today on a Saturday, you guys are doing a wonderful job. And of course, we have to add parents to this. Important stakeholders, right? The models for the children. But it's not an easy job. You've got lots to do. This hardly covers it. This itself already looks quite overwhelming when I think about the number of students we have to teach. But this hardly covers it, right? And what did George Bernard Shaw say? George Bernard Shaw said, those who can, do. Those who can't, will. Teach. Come on, join me on a collective eye roll. Those who can do, those who can't teach. Thank you very much, Mr. Shaw, but I'm going to give you a counter proposal here. This is from Aristotle. Those who can do, those who understand teach. I think Aristotle comes short. Absolutely. Right, so if anyone ever says that to you, because I've heard it, anyone ever says that to you, go, I'll give you Aristotle back. Okay, so this is the video they wanted you to see, and I'm going to play it for you. Oh, there's no sound.
There is. Pause it.
Okay, so I go back. I'm not going to pretend like I know what to do with that. Okay, while we wait for the video, since I have time, okay, I'm going to go on to the fourth big idea. Can I do that? Or do you want me to try now?
Dear teacher.
Okay, we got it. Well done, Manali. Okay, you guys ready for the video?
Dear teacher, I want to learn, but it's really hard for me. I learn differently from my friends. Here are some things which you knew about how we learn at school. I wish you knew these things about me. I wish you knew. I wish you knew things about me. I wish you knew. I wish you knew about me.
If you tell me to stop fidgeting, I will have to use up all my brain just to do that.
I wish you knew that I think it's not to move. It's hard for me to learn. I wish you knew I tried as hard as I can, but you still want me to try harder.
Even though I seem really blurred at times, that I cannot take instructions really well, I am trying my best and the information just doesn't go through my head at times.
I really don't like to read in front of class. Whenever you tell the class everything we're supposed to do, I think, how am I ever going to remember all of this? I wish I knew that my parents when they draw my homework. Many times I have to read things again to understand. I get upset and frustrated when it takes me longer to do my work than my other friends and classmates. So, here are some things that can help. I wish you knew this about me.
Please don't scold me in front of the whole class.
Can you give me more time to do things? I need more time for me. If I go too fast, I don't understand what I have read.
Sometimes I look better when I'm walking around on my chair.
I learn better when someone is reading to me and I can follow the words in my book. Can you put the list of things we need to do on the board so that I can read it and I don't have to remember it? Can you give me homework so I can do that? Please don't make me catch up my work at recess.
Dear teacher, I wish you knew that I appreciate you and I care for you.
My brain is different from my friends, but it is still amazing. I mean, it's not a disadvantage, but it also has the good thing. You may be better at something, better at a subject than the other.
I wish you knew that I really appreciate you in my life and that I really just want to say thank you.
I wish you knew that I appreciate everything you have done for me. Sincerely, your student.
Your student.
Your student. Musician. Your student.
Your student.
Your student. Your student. Your student.
Your student.
Okay, so I clearly don't have the time to go on to skip the third one. I'm skipping the fourth big idea, but I think you know this. One size does not fit all. I go on to share with you some checklists that you can do. So if a diagnosis of a learning difference, an SLD, is not viable for some learners for some reasons, then research has shown that teachers are highly accurate in being able to identify the needs of their learners. Okay, so there are some checklists that I've just added here for your reference, and there's lots more. And of course, I go on to talk about teaching, and I suppose the Anjali Morris Foundation will have to invite me again so I can finish this presentation.
Another session in the afternoon.
You'll be hearing my voice again.
She can continue after the
Seriously, because we have
Okay.
if you make a quick consensus, one of us speakers had a misfortune in the family and he can't make it, the last session.
I see.
So everybody's okay, we can do another.
Yes.
All right, okay, so then you know what? I won't waste any more of your time because I would rather just go through the deck as per normal. So we will start again from where we left off, which was big idea 4.
Yeah.
Okay? All right, great. So we'll talk again.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much.
I think we won't do a closing for Geetha. We just invite Geetha.
Individuals who learn differently. Name me one ILD group that I spoke about.
Children who are diagnosed with LD are gifted.
Okay,
But they are not, like, giftedness is not that much highlighted as their LD.
excellent. So, ILDs who have giftedness and a learning difficulty, they are not identified, and therefore that is one group of individuals who learn differently. How about another group?
The one which is not diagnosed and
Very good. The one who is not diagnosed and struggling. So I shared 2 subgroups of ILDs. And of course, your individuals who have specific learning differences, they are also individuals who learn differently. Okay, very good. Now, where did I, and I hope I was right in saying it, where did I say the education paradigm seemed to be centered on? What kind of a paradigm? Starts with D. Deficit paradigm. Do we still agree? Okay. What did I say we should be looking at first? Excellent. Thank you so much. I said flip the narrative. Abilities first, disabilities. Excellent. All right. Now we're ready to go on to big idea 4. Okay. What's wrong with this picture? I mean, don't tell me the guys are not good looking or stuff like that, but I mean, what's wrong with the picture? Something's clearly wrong.
So then tall guys and then short legs trousers.
Yeah? I knew you guys would know this. Hey, well done. I knew you'd know this. Excellent. Because one size does not fit all. No children are alike. No people are alike. No 2 persons are alike, right? All of us are different. Our children are different. Which means that the intervention and the identification that we give our children needs to also bear that in mind, right? And we've been talking about this over the 2 days. That's the most amazing part of my experience here in SAMAGRA, is that we're all actually thinking so alike. Isn't that amazing that we as a community have come this far and our thoughts are so aligned? So, when a psychological assessment does not help you identify an individual who learns differently, right? And therefore maybe you feel your hands are tied and you feel that you may not be able to provide the access in terms of support or resources for that person, what do? We try something else. because one approach does not fit everything. So in the case where an assessment does not result in a diagnosis, but you can see the child is clearly struggling. Remember Tara, right? You can see the child is clearly struggling. We've got to do something. First thing, observations. As a teacher, pay attention. Sit in the classroom, observe the child. The session before this, the clip from Theresa Mimpar. Theresa Mimpar. Yeah? What was the problem there? The teacher did not pay attention to the student, right? And of course, I believe she has her own baggage. But the point here is, observations are a great way for us to understand what's going on with our children. And it's not only just blank observations. Have some thoughts in your mind already. Ask yourself what you want to understand. And you can, for example, look at some of these. So you could look at the cognitive and motivational variables. You can see, where does this child show greater motivation when the task is slightly different? When it involves creativity, when it involves technology. I mean, make certain specific points that you want to take note of. For example, does he cause more disruptions when you ask him to do writing-related activities? Does it change when you give him a keyboard? Does it change when he uses a stylus and a tablet? I mean, these are some of the things that you want to be more specific about. Go into the classroom, as you're conducting intervention, trial this out. You could use the ABC approach, antecedent, behavior, consequences. You could use the CBT approach, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's so many things you could use, but the point is to be able to go into the classroom and observe. You could also observe overexcitabilities. Like when does he get very excited? And what is it related to? Is it related to intellectual situations? Is it related to sensory situations? These things, through observations, will give you an insight about the student. So never mind that you don't have a psych report. Never mind that you don't have a diagnosis. This observation will give you great, valuable insights into your students. But there are some of us who would rather have something that's a little more formalized, right? And so that's where I showed you some checklists. And there's a lot. You can really just go online and check it out, discuss it with your peers, ask them, what do you think? You know, you could even run it with your peers. Do a little role play and go like, do you think you could get me somewhere? So check out these checklists. But that's just for identification. What about intervention? Teaching, right? So if we say that one size does not fit all, what does that mean we have to do? It means we have to create a plethora of opportunities, a whole buffet, right? That was the picture that we were shown, of opportunities and possibilities. And here, what I've written is exactly what Dr. Sujata said. She spoke about when it comes to UDL. Exposure to a wide range of things that tells you what are his or her interests, what are his or her strengths, exposing them to diverse teaching approaches and giving them diverse opportunities to demonstrate knowledge, skill, and application, encouraging interest and passion, grooming talents, and I cannot say this enough. When you've identified a strength, groom that strength. Because that will change how the child feels about himself. And we always talk about advocacy, right? We always talk about being the child's champion. And you guys are. You go to school boards, you go to the government, and you demand justice for students, right? So in order for us to do that, what we do need to do is help that child too feel like they deserve your advocacy, that they have something to offer as well. So always groom talent and provide opportunities to showcase their talents. This is really just the Orton-Gillingham approach. And the point I wanted to prove to you is that something as old as the Orton-Gillingham approach already subscribes to these principles. I'm not saying new is bad. I'm saying sometimes what we've been doing just needs a little tweaking, just a little enhancing, a little changing to come together with the times that we're in. And then in terms of intervention strategies, if I were to give you general strategies, I would pick these 5. So without going into specifics, for example, One of the most useful things is to consider the API cycle. How many of you are familiar with the API cycle? Okay, so it's assessment, planning, implementation, evaluation, right? So what that means is every 4 to 6 weeks, you assess, you plan, you implement, you evaluate the effectiveness of what you had implemented. And then you go on. Round 2, plan, implement, evaluate, right? It is extremely labor intensive. It's quite rich in terms of documentation though, which means that you can talk to anyone with a great deal of evidence about why this particular child needs the accommodation and the support that they need. Involve the child. I feel sometimes teachers do too much of the work. Have you ever been in a classroom and you realize you're hearing the teacher's voice more than the children's? And all the time? Yeah. We do all the work, but what that means is we are stripping autonomy from the children. Shift the locus of control. Pass it on to the child. Now, how can we do that? First, we talk to the child. We understand the child, and then we provide healthy boundaries. It's not a free-for-all, right? Because we do have specific objectives and goals. We have a purpose and intention. So by providing healthy boundaries, you are allowing them to make the choice. There is still choice, right? You're not dictating, but there are boundaries which you can define. And then, of course, create a sense of belonging. Again, when you talk about involving the child and shifting the locus of control and sense of belonging, I have to go back to what Miss Sopna told me, which Wiswas told her, remove the threat. Right? So what is threatening the child's sense of being able to control that situation, to take charge of his learning, to be an active participant in his own learning? Remove that threat, right? And then, of course, a circle of friends. We know that many of our kids sometimes have difficulties finding friendships, making friendships that are lasting. And so a group of peers who are helping each other will ensure that they too are educated on the diversity that is present in the classroom. You see, he doesn't have to be the only one in the classroom who is different. We've been talking about neurodiversity throughout this entire conference, and we're talking about how in a classroom, there are so many diverse learners who have preferences and likes and dislikes that are different. So if that is the case, he's actually not not alone. He's not by himself. So when we involve a group of friends to work together, what we are really saying is help them understand each other's strengths. Help them say that this person's going to help you with this, while you are going to help them with that. It's not necessarily a buddy system. It's really raising awareness amongst the children that everyone's got a particular contribution. They are a valued member of my classroom community, right? And of course, we know that children are natural teachers. I mean, how many of us didn't play teacher when we were young? I mean, you didn't? You didn't play teacher? Yeah, I played teacher all the time. You didn't play teacher?
I avoided it at all costs.
Oh, I need to talk to you.
I
You're
never knew I would be here.
No, but I remember doing that. I remember going to my dad, right, and teaching him the letters of the alphabet like as if I discovered the mysteries of the world, And he would of course play along. I mean, that's what parents do. But, I mean, there is research that suggests, and I forget who is it, I think it's Chomsky, who says that children are natural teachers, right? So, I mean, then involve them to work together with each other. And we all know about the importance of social learning, right? And of course, the concept of true peers. Now, what is true peers? Is someone who has a similar experience as you, right? So if we make learning difference, or individuals who learn differently, a more common and understood concept, then everyone's a true peer. Because what did we say? We said we all learn differently. The only thing is, some of us don't struggle, right? Those who struggle, they need our help, our guidance. But if we all learn differently, then everyone can be a true peer. So let's show them how that can be achieved. Contextualize, yes, okay, this one's one of my favorites, right? Whenever we teach, this was mentioned yesterday if I'm not wrong, the idea of relevance, right? I think it was Viswas who said this, relevance, right? Okay, so why do we need to learn algebra? Correct? That question about why do we need to learn algebra. So now when you're teaching in a classroom and you're teaching literacy, if we can create a situation or a scenario which is as authentic as possible, that learning becomes very relevant to them. Now, a very popular sort of maybe 10 years ago, it was really all the rage, is problem-based learning. Right? You provide them with a scenario and say, okay, we've got to now rectify this. This is the situation. Now let's kind of come up with a solution for this. I mean, that's a very simplistic explanation of PBL. But that is an authentic learning experience. Many years ago, well, that was really a long time ago, about 2 decades ago when I first started teaching, we used to bring books from the UK, right? And one of the silliest things would be that I would be teaching these children who are non-readers using these decodable books from Oxford Reading Tree. And it would be about kids going down a hill on a snowy day, on a sled, right? And my kids would be like, I mean, they'll be reading, they're decoding it, I've taught them the phonograms to do so, but what does it even mean to them? They don't even know what it means the concept of snow, you know? That what is cold? Singapore is tropical, we're right on the equator, hot, humid. So one of the things that's important for us is to make sure that what they're learning can be somehow converted into real-world experiences so that we are preparing them truly for the future, which is a question I really should have asked. As much as we have immediate goals for every class, every lesson, then you have maybe termly goals, then you have semestral goals, and then you have yearly goals. Yeah, we do have these short-term goals. What is the one true objective of an education? Is it for them to make it through the year? It's to make it through life. It's for the future. It's for the long term. That's why they say teaching is a thankless job, because you don't really see the rewards till they're much, much older, right? But you have made a difference. So if our true objective is to prepare them for a future which we ourselves may not be able to predict, then the least we can do is make sure that the experience they have can be as relevant as possible to the real world. And of course, accelerated learning opportunities. If a child can go beyond what your syllabus tells you they are supposed to learn, why not? No harm. And honestly, that's going to give them a great deal of confidence. Someone asked about how this can be implemented in a school. In the full deck, I mentioned that I've hidden some slides, right? But in the full deck, there is a framework that can be applied for an entire school. But this too can be a framework if you can advocate, or if you're a school leader, if you can make it happen. I talked about strengths first, challenges second. So if you start with identifying and advancing the learner strengths, okay, so that becomes your focus, not the deficit, but this becomes your focus. And then you develop an environment that is both supportive as well as inclusive. And at the same time, you provide support for the learning challenges that they are facing. So again, I never said ignore that. I never said neglect that. But that is not the first thing we should be looking for. And then finally, for some individuals who learn differently, you need to help them understand. Just in the session that we heard just now, he spoke about the importance of having the language to understand, right? If you can name it, you can tame it, he said. Some of our children don't understand or have the vocabulary for the experiences that they are going through. So if that is the case, we need to help them become more aware of that situation they find themselves in. It is not just about, I care for you, I really want you to be successful, I'm there for you, but it's also about making them ambassadors for themselves, right? So in extreme cases, it may even require the presence of mentoring and counseling to help them understand their own situation. So this framework, while it's very old, 1990, is still relevant today because our schools are still sitting quite firmly in a deficit paradigm. Okay, so like I said, the full deck has another framework that you can consider, but this one is simple. I started the presentation this morning by sharing with you the first person who changed my life. That was my father, when he suggested that I should teach children whom society thinks are unteachable. Then I told you about Bara's profile, right? Another person who changed my view on what I should be doing as an educator, and now with an opportunity to speak to the likes of you. If only one of you would change your mind and go back and say, yeah, I'm going to start on a strengths approach. I'm going to say abilities first, disabilities second. I've been able to do something. So Tara had an impact in my life as well. Now, I want to talk about Ben. Ben was one of my students. 9 years old when he joined me. He had been passed around from teacher to teacher. Okay? And finally, at that time, I was already doing some training, so I was considered fairly experienced. So they said, Geetha, you try him. It was almost a challenge. They were like, oh, you talk so much, you go on stage and you preach, right? Why don't you show us that you can do it? So yes, we have to eat humble pie sometimes. So we say, okay, fine, yes, I'll take the student. So Ben, 9, he was very aggressive with his classmates. Very aggressive. Okay, so when I mean aggressive, I mean physically aggressive. He was diagnosed, so he has dyslexia and ADHD, and he was on medication. It wasn't the time release type, so by the time he'd come to my class in the afternoon, after school, the medication would have worn off. So sometimes he'd be sluggish, sometimes he would have stomach cramps. These are all the symptoms of medication like Ritalin, sorry. He was very aloof and sarcastic with teachers. So when the teachers would try and help him or give him advice or give him instructions, he'd be either ignoring them or he would be very sarcastic. But you know what they say? Sarcasm is a sign of intelligence, right? Okay, so very sarcastic, and of course his IQ was high. 138, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, high IQ. But completely uninterested and unmotivated when he came to work. Very poor handwriting, you can barely read it. It's almost as if he just dragged the pencil across the page. It was a pain to see. He showed signs of frustrations. He would often go to the toilet. He would give excuses saying that he needed to go to the toilet. He would slam his pencil down on the table in the middle of work. Literally just slam it down and just stare at you, death stare. And you'd be like, okay, you need to take a moment to pause. Continued to disrupt lessons. One quirky thing about him is that almost on a monthly basis, he would go through this process. So 1 month, he would learn about trains. He would learn it to the point of mastery, and then he will drop it and he'll go to something else about birds. And then it'll be all about birds, and then he'll drop it and go to something else. So this was an information gatherer. Like he was constantly seeking information, and once he came to a point where he felt he had mastered that content, he will move on to something else. So that was quite quirky of him. High vocabulary and a great sense of humor. So when he wanted to be, he was exceedingly charming. Him and I had a ball of a time. I would consider it kind of mature humor. So I don't mean mature in the sense of like PG rating or that kind of mature. But it was that kind of, I call it the British dry humor. That sort of humor where when you say it, you look at him and then I would start to smile and he knows he's got me, and then I will start to laugh. And in terms of the high vocabulary, I used to call him my little linguist, because he knew the precise word to use sometimes. And you go like, wow. I mean, you were able to find that exact word to describe this exact moment. But he was a problem. He was considered a problematic student, and he had gone through maybe 3 to 4 teachers before he came to me. Okay, so what did Geetha do? 5 years into teaching, right? So that's maybe about 16 years ago. I started out doing what I had been trained to do. I prepared a lesson plan and I said, okay, with my best smile, being my charming self, I said, come on, Ben, let's do some work. I just got all hyped up. It didn't work. First lesson, failure, terrible failure. Second lesson, same thing, nothing worked. And honestly, I was embarrassed to admit that, oh no, it's not working. Here I am, teaching special needs officers who are working in schools what to do, and I can't help this boy. I had to figure this out. I couldn't continue doing what I had to do if I couldn't help Ben. So what did I have to do? I had to learn. Hard to admit sometimes, right? And hard to do. I was in my late 20s at that time. Right? You think you've learned everything, I know. They're supposed to be lifelong learners and all. But you think that you have come to a stage where some things should be automatic. But then it wasn't with him. It was a lesson for me, right? And so I read up, I talked to some people, and then I said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to use a strengths-based approach. Okay. Call it providence, call it divine intervention, call it luck. Call it coincidence. What I did was I put together like a Frankenstein checklist. I took some things from this place, some things from that place, and I put a checklist together. I sat with him and I said, come, let's do this checklist. He did it with me. Of course, I had to read, I had to ask the questions, and he would just give me answers. Sometimes I had to check to make sure he was not being naughty and giving me like a fake answer or answer that he thinks would trick me. And after we finished that checklist, I sat down with him and I went through the outcomes of that strengths checklist with him. And clearly, he had strengths. So he almost looked at me with he comes across as quite conscious, right? So he almost looked at me as like, are you trying to pull a fast one? Like, are you the next teacher who's gonna try and fool me with this? And I told him, look, no, this is evidence. This is really what you said, this is what you did, and these are your strengths. And so, using a strengths-based approach, I said, okay, you know what? Since these are your strengths, I'll allow you to set your pace. I had my goals for the term. So the term is about 10 weeks, 20 hours of intervention. I said, I want to be able to say that you have achieved all of this by the end of a term. How are we going to get there? All right, so we plotted the roadmap together. I said, okay, phonograms, how fast do you want to go? Reading comprehension strategies, how fast do you want to go? Because I want to get here. So we worked together and we agreed on a plan. Now sometimes, so as this was going on, he began to realize, oh, actually I can do faster in some things. And so we would adjust the plan. And by the end of the term, we would realize we had surpassed some goals. Some goals, maybe we were a little bit short. But it was working because now he was working with me. Right? He was not just listening to me. I wasn't just giving him instructions. I wasn't telling him what to do. We were in a partnership. Right? It's what do they say? Do or die together. Right? So, how did I allow him to demonstrate his abilities? So I give you an example, 2 things. How many of you remember reading these books? The kind of books where if you are at a cave and you want to go through the tunnel in the cave, turn to page 16. If you want to go around the cave, go to page 112. Remember those books? Yeah. Okay, so because he was resistant to tasks and because he was resistant to things like reading, when I realized this is something that he liked to do, that's what we did as part of our reading. Right, so I would find these books. They were not phonetically regular, so we would go through the reading together. And the best part was him and me arguing about the decision he was going to make. Right? He would say, no, I'm going to go through the cave. And I was saying, hey, you don't know what's inside. It's dark. I brought a torch. Yeah, but what if there's something dangerous in there? It's okay. So we'll argue, right? And then we'll say, okay, let's see if your decision is right. And then he will make a choice. We will continue to read. In terms of demonstrating his writing, we did the most incredible thing. We came up with a Dungeons and Dragons type game. Okay? Just normal cardboard, nothing fancy. okay? We used erasers for tokens, so really cheap stuff, okay? But what he had to do was he had to write the roles, he had to write the script, he had to write the outcomes, so he had to start getting involved in writing. What I had realized with Ben was that if I find something that he's interested to do, and I find something that plays to his strengths, he will then be willing to learn what he needs to learn in order to be able to do that. That's what Ben taught me. Instead of me going, okay, what does this letter say? What does this letter say? And then saying it's going to help you read, I said, do you want to read? You want to read this book and make decisions? Then, okay, but you're stuck at this word. You know what's going to help you? Okay, let's try. This phonogram says, F. Do you know what I mean? Flipped it. And then he was more and more interested to try and master these rules. And I was still doing the same stuff. I was still teaching him the phonograms, I was doing the card drill, the sound drill, the spelling drill, and all of this. But he was now willing to do it because he was able to read as a result of this. He was able to write as a result of this. The changes that I noticed were subtle, okay? Oh, and I should say, at the end of it, when we finished that board game, right, I had to bribe some of my colleagues. And we're an NGO, so when I mean bribe, I mean like snacks, food. And you know, I had to say, you know what, I'll feed you guys, come. And there were 3 of us, so 2 other friends of mine, colleagues of mine, we played. He was the game master, and we played the game. And there were so many things that came out of that. He began to realize that not all adults are out to get him. Not all adults are out to prove that or make life difficult for him, because he was very capable in understanding that people might do that to him. It's the fact that he was able to start to show interest. Initially, I didn't notice. Honestly, at the start, I was just trying it. It was like an experiment. But gradually, I started to realize, hey, yeah, he doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't go to the toilet anymore. He started coming to class 30 to 45 minutes before his lesson starts. And I would have a class before that, during that time. And I would tell him, Ben, you can come, you can sit at my desk, but you cannot disrupt. The boy who was aggressive with classmates, the boy who was disruptive in class, would quietly sit down, mind his own business. Right? Just happy to be in that environment. So, I must tell you that Ben is now an investment banker. He's an investment banker. We connected on LinkedIn when I recognized his name. And 5 years ago, so we connected on LinkedIn, and now we're on WhatsApp. We chat, we still chat, right? Got married last year. And the thing is, Ben, I told Ben 5 years ago, I said, Ben, you changed my life, you know. In a moment of pure authenticity, we were having a conversation over WhatsApp, and I just felt like telling him, no, you changed my life. You made me see things differently. And he said, well, you changed mine. And these moments are rare, but you changed lives. And from my father to someone like Tara, to someone like Ben, these people have come in my life and have changed the way I look at things. Just as all of you have come into my life and changed the way I look at things. Helped me become a better version of myself. And of course, that's what I hope that we can do for our students, and that's what I hope we can do for ourselves. I want to end with this slide, but I really think I need to do 2 more, okay? So very quickly, acknowledge and encourage the strengths. It does pay off, because it changed the way I teach. Now I make sure that what I look for is the strengths, and then I use their strengths, make that the focus, and then I say, okay, how do we achieve greater, you know, abilities with that? You're laughing at this, not me, right?
Number 4.
No, but this is exactly what you mean. I mean, if you get it wrong, you get it wrong. So an F is an F, you can't change that. But the teacher found a way to celebrate the child. So this is what I like about this, but yes. So, final reflections. 2 more slides only from me, okay? And you can say, goodbye, Geetha. First one. From the morning, now I'm wrapping things up at the end. One question for you, an ethical question. I know the power of a psychological assessment, but do we exclude students who are struggling because they do not meet the diagnostic criteria? Thank you. No, yes, you should not. Any child who's in front of you and is clearly struggling, and you have the power to change that struggle, we need to act. And let me tell you why this is important. Because the profile that I shared with you is of my daughter, Tara. This is not her. I should have put a picture of her instead. Yeah. But that profile, that parent, that was me. And I was already a special educational needs teacher. I was in the field. And I realized that my daughter had nowhere to go. I had been giving her intervention since she was 4 years old, because I could spot the difference between her and her brother. And when she was at 8, she was still able to cope, but she was still failing in her spelling. I was going to the schools, I was doing all of this. And she still couldn't get the help she needed. Why? Because she wasn't found dyslexic. I continued providing intervention for her, but there's only so much a working mother can do. So there is a little bit of guilt. Because, here I am helping other children, and, my own child, I wasn't able to help. But by the time she turned 10, I got her assessed again. And guess what, folks? She was found to have mixed dyslexia. But what does this tell you? Now, if she had had intervention when she was clearly struggling through me, but if the schools were willing to also provide that support, put her in a special, like a high interest class, or do something, help me out, basically, right? Maybe that gap between her and her peers may not have widened so much so that at 10, she was found dyslexic. So I stand by this very strongly. If a child is struggling, I don't need a diagnosis, I help, because I'm there and I can, okay? Now, the last point is this. Our children, individuals who learn differently, SLD, those without a diagnosis, those who are TICE exceptional, they don't need to be fixed. They don't. We've been conditioned that they need to be fixed, but they don't need to be fixed. They need to be found. They need to be found. So let me end by reading this. Maybe your child has challenges in some areas, but they also have exceptional gifts in others. The world is obsessed with creating normal, but it's the exceptional ones that will change the world. And they're doing it through you. Okay, so thank you very much for giving me this second opportunity to speak to you. This is me. Thank you for staying back. And I've got a whole host of references here for you. If you feel like you need something to help you sleep at night, just write to me. If you don't have access to these papers, I'll be happy to share them with you. And thank you again for having me here. Oh, any questions? It's okay if you want to go back and have the final bit of your weekend.
I think everyone is speechless looking at this story and the case studies.
Introspecting on how we as educators can make some difference.
No.
I do want to say something. I'm sorry, but I'm going to take the mic. This is which is happening.
So, we have a lot of young children, I use the word children, young adults who come, a lot of freshers who join us. And I don't know where it has come from, but it's coming from our own organization, where I say exactly what you said, that, all of us have the opportunity to change someone's life as special educators. It came back to bite me when feedback was given. I'm not thinking negatively, I'm just thinking, why do this whole Okay, let me finish my thought process. I'm a little agitated. So it came back to bite me saying, oh, there's so much stress. I'm supposed to change someone's life. I can't work here. Too much responsibility. I'm saying changing your life can be a statement, can be a smile. When you've chosen professions, if every doctor said, I didn't want to do a surgery because you might die and I don't want to do it, there is responsibility. But I'm just trying to say, everybody is a special educator here or related to. It's not easy. You don't want an easy job. No one gets paid to do an easy job. It's a contract in the end of the day, whether you get paid for it or no. So my humble request, even to people who work with Anjali Morris Foundation, when I say, with a lot of pride, you should go back and say, it's a responsibility given to me and maybe I can change someone's life. Don't take it as, oh my God, there's pressure and I can't handle it. I'm saying this a big appeal to people who work with us. The idea is not to put you under pressure. The idea is to tell you, you can change someone's life. It's very empowering to know you can do that. So that's what I was saying. Thank you so much.
Very well said. I shall step down with you.
No questions?
I guess I don't need a mic. My voice is so.
No, but if you use the mic, you don't have to. It's
On it? Okay, all can hear me? Yeah, so you shared Ben's case study. So I would like to ask, you mentioned he was aggressive with his classmate and all that thing. So do you work on that also, or do you give him only intervention?
Yeah, we did work on that. We may not have had the expertise in-house, but of course, you know, we try to figure out what are the triggers that made him respond in the way he did. But he wasn't a very easy child to read because being as like aware as he was, he can mask things quite easily, right? But we did talk to the parents. Both parents are doctors actually, medical professionals, and quite progressive in the sense that they were willing to listen to us and maybe take action, and we did send him for counseling. But you see, the root cause for him was that whether it was boredom or frustration that he couldn't do what he knew in his mind he was more than capable of doing, we don't know. But what he needed was to understand that there is a way for us to uncover this, and he needed to find something that would make him excited enough to want to care. He had reached a point where he didn't care. And so we did work with counselors to help him with his anger management. We actually also worked with his doctor. So his parents were not the ones who were medicating him in that sense, like prescribing the medication. So we did work with his doctor to get a time-release sort of medication for him so that it moves slowly throughout the day, instead of, boom, during the day, and then by the time he comes home, to say the afternoons, he's either completely wiped out, or he's like not the same person. And with the time release, we did see some difference because he became more alert, like he would be more responsive and things like that. So we did do a few things, but what I was sharing was primarily what we were able to do in that 2 hours that I had with him per week. Yes, so it did involve a village to help him. I shouldn't take all the credit.
Thank you so much, Geetha. A request for Anjali Morris Trust is because one of the things in India we lack is sharing collective wisdom. And so I'm just going to take a lead from what she was saying. The appeal is, yes, those who are budding special educators, counselors, psychologists is being 100% genuine. Because today with media and all of that, the youngsters have become so influenced in faking so beautifully that it's a task for counselors to first spend several sessions to just crack that. And that makes it miserable for us because we know we could do so much and we're not able to do. That is one. Second is, thank you so much for sharing something so insightful, and I could see that you were so invested genuinely. I think the 100% thing that converted is the genuineness. And today, when we talk about it, those people, I mean, you call us ancient, old, or whatever, I don't believe that. But the many cases that has really transformed for others and for us has been our unapologetic genuineness. We went beyond what Western people will say, these are ethics. You cannot talk to your client after 5 o'clock. You cannot greet a person at a coffee. Who said that? Somebody comes to me and asking as a professional, they're not talking to me as Devasena, you come and have coffee with me. They're saying, I'm in need. Can we sit in a place? I had a teenage client who wouldn't sit and talk in my clinic because she thinks it's adult place. You're calling me to a clinic and wanting me to talk? She sat 45 minutes just staring at my face. How uncomfortable is that? And I'm thinking, how can I tackle? What can I do? Is there any other way? She's too old. I can't give her drawing stuff. I can't entertain her. Then I said, you know what? Can we go to barista and sit? That's it. 3 sessions out and we were saying goodbye to each other. So you can change things. So don't stop yourself. Yes, we have to follow ethics. That's an entirely new thing. But we can also do that. And lastly is when we're talking about, again, collective wisdom, cases like this give insight about strategies and stuff. So if you have, share it with Anjali Morris Trust about your practices. You know, Maza meets Denare, please put your name, all of that, that's fine. But that can help us to showcase and, you know, share with other people who are learning. Because these are things we are learning from the West, who are selling books for 3,000, 4,000 bucks, where I have it in my cupboard for the last 30 years. What's the point? Yeah? So thank you very much for this opportunity. It's been a wonderful 2 days. And you've had wonderful speakers, and thank you again for stretching yourself. It's not easy. You have to say, and then say, oh my God, I have to come back again. I would be like, oh my God. So thank you so much.
The only complaint I have is the aircon's blowing and it's making my teeth chatter. So I don't know if I sounded nervous as I was talking. But thank you very much, Dr. Desai, for that. Can I just say something about what she said? And I know I'm keeping you all, but you know, there's one thing. Sometimes people say, you know, it's so hard, the system is broken, I can't fix it, I'm just one person, right? And I understand, I do empathize with that. There's a lot to do, right? But the thing is, to that child, you, that one person, you can make a difference. And if it means you have to keep talking about it, keep talking about it. Get hoarse, get a sore throat, drink water, take a lozenge, and then come back and talk about it. It's just something you have to do to make change. If you feel that bit of discomfort, that this is what I feel I should be doing, this is how, that frustration, I want to be able to do this, but the system is stopping me, that discomfort is what's going to push for change. If you don't feel that discomfort, then you're, yeah, absolutely. It's that discomfort, so enjoy that discomfort. Right? Because that discomfort is going to make sure that you keep at it. And I'm very confident you guys stayed back, you'll keep at it. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Geetha ma'am. It was truly enlightening, and thank you so much once again for showing willingness to take the second session, and all the participants for your enthusiasm and patience to be seated and listening to it. I just want to take a moment to thank you for sharing your truly inspiring journey with us. And your story had shown us the importance and the difference between what are the learning differences and what are the learning disabilities, and how it is important to cater even those needs who are not labeled and named or tamed. Yeah? So we have learned how crucial interventions like iReach are, and how essential teachers are in making students feel seen, understood, and included. What really stands out from her journey is her focus on flipping the narrative. Instead of focusing on what's wrong with students, we should focus and emphasize on what their strengths are, their potential is. The education system often focuses on weaknesses, but her work proves that it's about focusing on what we can do to help these students shine. And let's not forget the role of giftedness in all its forms. It's not about pushing students harder. It's about finding the right ways to support them and give them the tools to excel. Geetha, thank you for showing us all how to lead the empathy and dedication. We are lucky to have you as a guide in this journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Finally, we are coming to the last part of the conference, and I'm little, what we can say, nervous and little emotional because it has been truly a celebration of knowledge. It was a journey of knowledge which we will never forget. As we come to the closing of today's conference, as Sansia promised, I'm going to recite the poem again.
Can we have that on screen, that poem, please, Nali?
It's not on the
It's in the script.
Yeah, it's in the script.
You know, visually, it makes sense. If we have 2 seconds. Possible? Not possible.
Yeah, I'll share.
What's her name? Kritika.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I am not used to addressing an audience like this, but instead of just coming and speaking with you, ma'am, Tara's story kind of resonated, and I was diagnosed with dyslexia at 13, which is rather late in the day, which meant that 12 years, of which there were about 6 years of schooling, I went undiagnosed. And that meant I was all sorts of things. I was lazy, I was not doing my bit, I wasn't trying hard enough, and the whole spectrum. This is 1994-95, which means a lot of the school teachers had not heard of the word dyslexia, right? This is before Tare Par, which meant it was not in public knowledge, in spoken word, in common parlance. It was just not talked about. Apparently, I think my mother had dyslexia, and it does pass in the genetic line. And she saw me struggle with the similar experiences that she had had. Obviously, hers went completely undiagnosed. Now, the process of, when you mentioned that people who learn differently, and all of us have our own ways of learning, resonated, and I could kind of identify. It brought me to tears a couple of times that this is how difficult it gets. And someone just decides to, step in and say, this child is maybe talkative, maybe quiet, seems intelligent, but the marks are not there, or the regular system doesn't seem to identify. And that person could be just about anybody in your lives. You could have an uncle, an aunt, a niece, a special educator, yes, with working with a batch of children, but someone in the family, someone in the friend circle, my friend's child seems to be having a problem. It's not where you make the difference somehow. You can make the difference in just about any child's life. We can make the difference in just about any child's life. And then the journey from there. So my mother had no formal training as to how to go about it, how to help her child. And I would be more of an auditory learner. Writing or things would be very difficult for me. Tape recorder hua karta tha us samay mein, magnetic tape wala. As a working mother, she would record the poems that I had to learn and recite. Onto that, she would record my lessons, and I would be able to just open the book and listen to them repeatedly. So I would learn them. She came up with these absolutely weird, bizarre ways of color coding my books for me. All the reds and the greens and the blues, and color, visually the color made an impact. So I'm sure you're all aware of these techniques now, today. I'm talking 30 years ago, 35 years ago, when it was still very, you know, a color box or a geometry box was something you got as a gift on a birthday, not something you just went and picked it up. So yes, we have, sometimes it's dismissed, sometimes one is, we don't know what we can do, especially without the supportive authority, we don't know what we can do. There's a lot we have been doing. There's a lot that the community has been doing, which has brought us where we are. And kudos to all those mothers, teachers, each one of us who has been bringing this change knowingly, unknowingly in the lives of students. I just wanted to bring this up for a moment. Thank you.
So I'm going to recite the poem, which Sansia promised that we may hold a new meaning to it. The Unseen Struggle. In a world of letters, numbers, and lines, a maze of puzzles, hidden signs. The mind sees paths others don't tread, a silent storm inside the head. Words may tangle, numbers may flee, but brilliance hides where few can see. With patience and care, the fog will clear. For every challenge brings skills to revere. So let us honor, not dismiss, the unique minds that think like this. For every story holds its grace, even in a slower paced race. I hope this has hold already the meaning, which is a little different than the beginning of the conference. And we can see actually through that, yes, there is a significance in whatever we are doing for our society, for our children and students. Now I would like to extend my sincere thanks and gratitude to all of our wonderful speakers for enlightening us and inspiring us to do this kind of work and continue doing it in our future. We hope the discussions and insights shared today will inspire further collaboration and innovation. I would like to thank all the participants for your enthusiasm and participation. I'm sure we all are going to back richer with the knowledge we gained. Special thanks to Hotel Pancharatna for the wonderful venue, delicious food and arrangements. Last but not the least, thanks to our pillars of MF, without whom this great event was impossible. Our own Swapna, Medha and Tanima. Your guidance, support and zeal were invaluable and precious, and kudos to the entire AMF team for making this event a great success. Even the smallest effort and contribution really made it to the greater one. Yeah, and adding another feather in our cap. Thank you once again for being a part of this experience. We look forward to seeing you at our future events. I declare that the program has come to an end. But before going, I just request everyone to give your feedback so we can improve our services and just to ensure that we keep improving in the future as well. We have posted a feedback link on our WhatsApp group. Please take a moment to fill it up before leaving. Also, there are certificates of participation which are available at the collection desks and registration desks. And I understand that some of you have already collected it. Who hasn't, please collect it before leaving. Additionally, one more thing, as mentioned by Malti ma'am yesterday, we are multi-funder organization. We welcome donations. So if at all anyone is willing to donate in future, we have a code scanner link on our website as well. And if anyone is willing to donate immediately today, we have a scanner on the registration desk as well. Thank you so much and wonderful evening ahead.
All the sleepless nights. All of us together.